All right, let's talk about something most of us have been through, the routine traffic stop. We're going to break down an argument that claims this super common experience might actually be a constitutional trap hiding in plain sight. Let's get into it.
So, where does this whole idea even come from? Well, the argument we're looking at today really centers on this one person, a man who, the source says, kept getting thrown in jail. And his crime? Simply refusing to get a driver's license. That one story is the springboard for this entire legal debate.
Okay, so what's the actual legal claim being made here? It all goes back to the Fifth Amendment, the right to not incriminate yourself. The core idea is that a simple traffic stop might be creating a kind of constitutional catch-22. And this, right here, is the central puzzle. Think about it. If a police officer pulls you over because they suspect you're driving without a license, how can they then demand that you show them a license? The argument is that this puts you in an impossible spot. You either admit you don't have one, or staying silent is taken as a sign of guilt. According to this viewpoint, this isn't just some abstract legal theory. No, it's a nightmare hiding in plain sight, a potential violation of our rights that's happening millions of times every single year. It completely reframes a standard police request into something, well, a lot more serious. The argument gets even more provocative from here. It introduces this concept it calls the pre-crime tax system. This idea totally reframes things like license fees, registration, and mandatory insurance. The claim is that they aren't about safety at all. Instead, they're payments you make for harm you might cause in the future, not for anything you've actually done wrong. And here's where you can really see the contrast. We're all taught that justice means innocent until proven guilty. But this source argues that the whole system has been flipped upside down. Now it's more like, pay the government for permission first, or we're just going to assume you're a criminal. So you might be wondering, if the system really is as flawed as this source claims, how does it just keep going? Well, the next part of the argument looks at the mechanics of control and, why we all tend to comply. The answer, according to this argument, really comes down to one number: 99%. That's the estimated percentage of people who, during a traffic stop, just comply with whatever the officer asks for. No questions asked. And that mass compliance? Well, the argument is that it's the very foundation holding the whole thing up. And that's the crucial point here. The idea is that when almost everybody goes along with it, the whole process just seems legitimate and normal. This constant reinforcement creates a powerful illusion, right? So anyone who actually does push back looks like they're the one causing the trouble. This brings up a really important distinction between two words: consent and submission. The argument is that consent is one thing. It's freely given. But when you're pulled over on the side of the road with the threat of arrest hanging over you, handing over your documents isn't a free choice. It's submission. Okay, so how does the system legally defend itself? The source suggests there's a kind of loophole at play here, something it calls the regulatory runaround. And this is where it gets really strange. The source claims the government classifies these things as regulatory infractions, not actual crimes, so that full constitutional protections don't have to kick in. But, and this is a big but, the penalties are things like being arrested, fined, or even jailed. Those are criminal penalties. So the question is, how can something be non-criminal but still land you in jail? All of this, the Fifth Amendment, the fees, the compliance, it really all boils down to one single fundamental question. This is the absolute core of the entire debate, and your answer to it changes everything. So what do you think? Is your ability to travel, to just get from point A to point B, an inherent right you're born with? Or is it a privilege that the government can grant you and that it can also regulate or even take away? And how you answer that question changes the entire game. If you believe travel is a right, then the source says charging a fee to exercise it is unconstitutional, plain and simple. But if you believe it's a privilege, well, then the government can pretty much set whatever conditions it wants. And if you follow that privilege logic all the way to its conclusion, the argument is that you end up here: a system where freedom is something you have to buy. It means if you can't afford the fees to get around, you're effectively treated like a criminal just for being poor. So after that pretty deep critique of the whole system, what's the solution? The source does outline a path forward, but it comes with a warning that it takes a whole lot of personal courage. So the proposed plan has 4 steps. Step 1 is just education. You have to know your rights. Step 2 is to actually exercise them, like invoking the Fifth Amendment. From there, it's about challenging the system in court. And finally, step 4 is recognizing that this is all part of a much bigger picture about personal liberty. And this all builds up to a final, really powerful warning from the source. The idea is that our rights are kind of like muscles. If we don't use them, eventually they just fade away. So after we've walked through the arguments about self-incrimination, these so-called pre-crime taxes, and the huge debate over rights versus privileges, the source ultimately turns the question back on all of us. And that's where we're going to end it. What are your rights worth to you?